The whiskey glass shattered against the saloon floor the exact moment Catherine Monroe realized her life in Dodge City. Kansas was about to fall apart, and it was only half past noon on that sweltering July day in 1878. Catherine had been serving drinks at the Silver Spur Saloon for 3 years, saving every penny she could spare to eventually open her own dress shop. At 22 years old, she had built a respectable reputation in a town that did not easily grant such things to women who worked in saloons. She kept her distance from the gamblers, refused the advances of drunken cowboys, and attended church every Sunday without fail. The townspeople had come to see her as different from the painted ladies who worked upstairs, a good woman making her way in difficult circumstances after her parents had died of cholera. But Victoria Hartwell had other plans. Victoria was the daughter of the wealthiest banker in Dodge City, a beautiful blonde woman of 24 who had set her sights on marrying James Cooper, the most successful rancher within 100 miles. James was a quiet man of 26 with dark hair and honest gray eyes, the kind of man who paid his workers fair wages and kept his word. He came into town once a week for supplies, and for the past 2 months, he had been stopping by the Silver Spur for coffee, sitting at the corner table where Catherine served him. Their conversations had been innocent at first. He asked about her day, she asked about the ranch. He told her about the new foals born that spring. She told him about the books she borrowed from the church library. Slowly, something deeper began to grow between them, something neither of them had spoken aloud but both felt in the lingering glances and the way their hands brushed when she refilled his cup. Victoria had noticed. She noticed everything when it came to James Cooper. That morning, Victoria had walked into the Silver Spur with her lady's maid and 2 friends, ostensibly to invite Catherine to a church social. Catherine should have known better than to trust the sugary sweetness in Victoria's voice, but she had been raised to see the good in people. "Catherine, dear," Victoria had said, her blue eyes glittering with malice disguised as concern. "I felt it was my Christian duty to speak with you privately. There are rumors spreading about you, terrible rumors, and I wanted to hear the truth from your own lips before I defended you to the congregation." Catherine had set down the glass she was polishing, her heart beginning to race. What rumors? Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every ear in the room. "They are saying you have been entertaining men upstairs, that you are no different from the other women here. They say you have been taking money for favors, that you have been seen leaving the hotel with various gentlemen at inappropriate hours." The blood had drained from Catherine's face. "That is absolutely untrue." "I have never, of course I did not believe it," Victoria interrupted, her voice rising now, ensuring everyone could hear. "But then Mrs. Peterson told me she saw you with her own eyes coming out of the Grand Hotel at dawn last Tuesday with a married man. And Mr. Jenkins from the general store said you propositioned him just last week." "That is a lie." Catherine's voice shook with fury and fear. She had been at the hotel last Tuesday, but only because she had been sitting up all night with Mrs. Chen, the Chinese laundry woman whose husband had died suddenly. She had held the grieving widow's hand until sunrise, then walked home in full view of the awakening town. As for Mr. Jenkins, she had never spoken more than 10 words to the man, but the damage was done. Every person in the saloon was staring at her now, and she could see the judgment forming in their eyes. In a town like Dodge City, reputation was everything for a woman, and once lost, it could never be fully recovered. Victoria placed a gloved hand over her heart. "I am simply heartbroken that the rumors appear to be true. I had hoped to prove them wrong." She turned to her companions. "Come, ladies, we should not associate with such women." As Victoria swept out of the saloon, her skirts swishing with theatrical precision, Catherine stood frozen behind the bar. The glass had slipped from her numb fingers and shattered at her feet, and she could not seem to make her body move to clean it up. The saloon owner, a gruff man named Bill Hendricks, emerged from the back room. "Catherine, I am going to have to let you go. I cannot have this kind of talk associated with my establishment. I run a respectable business." "But it is not true," Catherine whispered. "None of it is true." "Does not matter what is true," Bill said, not unkindly. "Matters what people believe. I am sorry, girl, but you need to collect your things and go." Catherine walked out of the Silver Spur with her head held high, though tears blurred her vision. She made her way to the small boarding house where she rented a room, passing clusters of women who stopped their conversations to stare at her with cold eyes. By evening, she knew, the entire town would have heard Victoria's accusations. She spent the night lying awake, trying to figure out what to do. She had saved $43, enough to last her a few months if she was careful, but no one in Dodge City would hire her now. She would have to leave, start over somewhere else, carry the stain of these lies with her forever. The next morning, she packed her belongings into a single carpetbag and went to the church. If she could just speak to Reverend Matthews, perhaps he could help clear her name. He knew her character, knew she attended services faithfully. But when she arrived at the church, the Reverend's wife met her at the door. "I am sorry, Catherine, but the Reverend has asked that you not return to services here. We must think of the other congregants and the example being set for the young ladies of the parish." Catherine felt something break inside her chest. "Mrs. Matthews, I swear to you on my parents' graves I have done nothing wrong. These are lies spread by Victoria Hartwell because she is jealous." "Jealous?" Mrs. Matthews's eyebrows rose. "Of what exactly?" "Victoria Hartwell has everything a woman could want. Why would she be jealous of a saloon girl?" There was no answer Catherine could give that would not make her sound delusional. She turned and walked away from the church, away from the last shred of hope she had been clinging to. She was sitting on a bench outside the general store, trying to decide whether to use some of her precious savings for a stagecoach ticket, when she heard boots on the wooden walkway. She looked up to see James Cooper standing in front of her, his hat in his hands. "Miss Monroe," he said quietly. "I heard about what happened." Shame flooded through her. Of course he had heard. Everyone had heard. She looked down at her hands. "Then you know you should not be seen speaking with me, Mr. Cooper. It will only damage your own reputation. May I sit down?" She wanted to tell him no, wanted to spare him the association with her ruined name, but she found herself nodding. He sat beside her on the bench, close enough that she could smell the scent of leather and sage that clung to him. "I want you to know," he said, his voice steady and calm, "that I do not believe a word of it." Catherine's throat tightened. "It does not matter what you believe, the damage is done. It matters to me." He turned to face her, and when she finally met his eyes, she saw something there that made her heart stutter. "I know the truth, Catherine. I know who you are. I have been watching you for months now, seeing the way you treat people with kindness, the way you work hard and keep your dignity. I know you sit with Mrs. Chen when her husband died because I saw you going into the hotel that night. I brought her some food from my ranch and I saw you through the window, holding her hand while she cried." "You were there," Catherine whispered. "I was there. And I know that Victoria Hartwell is lying because I saw her talking to Mr. Jenkins 3 days ago, offering him money to say you propositioned him. I was in the back of the general store and they did not see me." Catherine's breath caught. "She paid him to lie," she did. "And I am going to tell everyone in this town exactly what I saw." James reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "But first, I need to tell you something I should have said weeks ago. I have fallen in love with you, Catherine Monroe. Somewhere between our first conversation and this moment, I lost my heart to you completely. And I do not care what lies Victoria Hartwell spreads or what the town believes. I know the truth and I choose you." The tears that had been threatening since yesterday finally spilled over, but these were different tears. "James, I do not understand. Why would Victoria do this? Because she wants me to marry her, and she saw that I was falling for you. She thought if she destroyed your reputation, I would turn away from you and finally pay attention to her." His jaw tightened. "She was wrong. but your reputation, your business, will survive. I am not without influence in this town, Catherine. People respect me, and when I tell them what I saw and what I know to be true, they will listen." He squeezed her hand gently. "But I need to know something first. These feelings I have, am I alone in them? Because if you do not feel the same way, I will still clear your name, but I will not press my suit." Catherine looked into his gray eyes and saw everything she had been afraid to hope for. "You are not alone," she whispered. "I have been fighting these feelings for weeks, telling myself it was impossible, that a man like you would never." He did not let her finish. He leaned forward and kissed her, soft and gentle, right there on the bench in the middle of town where anyone could see. It was scandalous and perfect, and Catherine felt the broken pieces inside her begin to mend. When he pulled back, he was smiling. "Come with me. We are going to pay a visit to Victoria Hartwell." They walked together through the streets of Dodge City, and Catherine could feel the stares following them. James kept her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, his head held high, daring anyone to say a word against her. The Hartwell mansion sat on the hill overlooking the town, a white-painted monument to wealth and privilege. James knocked on the door with enough force to make it rattle in its frame. Victoria's butler answered, his nose wrinkling slightly when he saw Catherine. "Mr. Cooper, Miss Hartwell is not receiving visitors at this time. She will receive me." James pushed past the butler with Catherine beside him. They found Victoria in the parlor, pouring tea for two of her friends. Victoria's face went pale when she saw them together, but she recovered quickly, painting on a look of shock and concern. "James, what are you doing with that woman? Surely you have heard, I have heard your lies," James said, his voice cold as winter steel. "And I am here to give you one chance to make this right, Victoria. One chance to go to every person in this town and tell them the truth, that you made up those stories about Catherine because you were jealous." Victoria's teacup rattled in its saucer. "I have no idea what you are talking about." "I only repeated what I heard. You paid Mr. Jenkins to lie." James stepped forward. "I heard you, I was there, and I am prepared to swear to it in front of the whole town." The color drained from Victoria's face completely now. Her friends were staring at her with dawning horror. "You did not," one of them breathed. "Victoria, tell me you did not do such a thing." Victoria's facade cracked. "She was taking you away from me. You were supposed to be mine, James." "My father already spoke to your father about a marriage arrangement. An arrangement I never agreed to," James said firmly. "I am not a prize to be won or a business deal to be negotiated. I am a man who has chosen the woman he loves, and that woman is Catherine Monroe. She is a saloon girl." Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. "She is nothing, nobody. I am the daughter of the wealthiest man in Dodge City, and you would choose her over me." "Every single time," James said quietly. "Because she has something you will never have, Victoria. She has honor, she has kindness. She has a good heart, and I would rather spend one day with her than a lifetime with you." Victoria lunged forward, her hand raised to strike Catherine, but James caught her wrist. "Do not," he said, his voice deadly calm. "You have done enough damage. Now you are going to fix it, or I am going to make sure every person in Kansas knows what kind of woman you really are. I have friends in the newspaper business in Wichita and Kansas City. I wonder how your father's bank would fare if it became known that his daughter is a liar and a manipulator who destroys innocent women for sport." Victoria wrenched her arm free, tears of fury streaming down her face. "You will regret this, James Cooper. Both of you will regret this." "The only regret I have," James said, "is that I did not see through you sooner." He turned to Catherine. "Come on, we have more visits to make." Over the next 3 days, James went to every person Victoria had lied to. He brought Catherine with him each time, standing beside her as he told the truth about what he had witnessed. He found Mrs. Peterson and explained that Catherine had been with Mrs. Chen at the hotel, performing an act of charity. He confronted Mr. Jenkins in front of a crowd at the general store, and when the man stammered and tried to deny it, James offered to swear an oath on the Bible. Mr. Jenkins broke down and admitted Victoria had paid him $50 to lie. The tide began to turn. The women who had shunned Catherine started to look ashamed. The Reverend's wife came to Catherine's boarding house with tears in her eyes and an apology on her lips. Bill Hendricks offered Catherine her job back with a raise in wages, but Catherine did not take the job. She had other plans now. James proposed to her properly 1 week after the confrontation with Victoria, taking her out to his ranch at sunset. The land stretched out around them in shades of gold and amber, the grass swaying in the evening breeze. He got down on one knee and offered her a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a simple gold band with a small sapphire. "I know we have not been courting long by conventional standards," he said, looking up at her with those steady gray eyes. "But I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Catherine Monroe. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you hold your head high even when the world is against you. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and build a life with me on this land?" Catherine sank to her knees in front of him, not caring that she was ruining her skirt in the dust. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 6 weeks later in the church with half the town in attendance. Victoria Hartwell did not come. She had left Dodge City 2 weeks after the truth came out, sent by her mortified father to live with relatives in Boston. Catherine heard later that Mr. Hartwell had made a sizable donation to the church and several charitable organizations in an attempt to repair the family name. Catherine wore a dress she had sewn herself, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried wildflowers that James had picked for her that morning. When she walked down the aisle and saw him waiting for her at the altar, his face full of love and promise, she knew she had found her home. The ranch became her world, and she discovered she loved it more than she ever could have imagined. She learned to ride horses, to help with the branding in the spring, to keep the accounts and manage the ranch hands' wages. James treated her as an equal partner in all things, asking for her opinion and valuing her judgment. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. That winter was brutal, with blizzards that killed part of their herd and left them struggling financially. Catherine worked alongside James day and night, nursing sick cattle and hauling feed through waist-deep snow. There were times when her hands were so cold she could not feel her fingers, times when she was so exhausted she fell asleep still wearing her boots. But they faced it together, and somehow that made even the hardest days bearable. On the coldest nights, they would lie together in their bed, wrapped in every quilt they owned, and James would hold her close and tell her about his dreams for the ranch, for their future. He wanted to breed the finest horses in Kansas, wanted to build a legacy that would last generations. And he wanted to do it all with her beside him. Spring came eventually, as it always does, and with it came new hope. The surviving cattle were strong and healthy, and James made a good profit at market. He used some of the money to buy Catherine a beautiful chestnut mare she named Autumn for the color of her coat. Catherine spent hours riding across the prairie, feeling the wind in her hair and the sun on her face, marveling at the freedom she had found in this life. She also started her dress shop, but not in the way she had originally imagined. Instead of a storefront in town, she worked from the ranch, taking orders from the women in Dodge City and the surrounding area. Her reputation as a seamstress grew, and soon she had more work than she could handle. She hired 2 young women from town to help her, paying them fair wages and teaching them the trade. On a warm evening in late May of their 2nd year of marriage, Catherine was sewing by lamplight when she felt James's hand on her shoulder. She looked up to find him smiling down at her. "Come outside with me," he said. "There is something I want to show you." She set aside her sewing and followed him out onto the porch. The sky was ablaze with stars, more stars than she had ever seen, scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. "Do you remember the first time I told you I loved you?" James asked, sliding his arm around her waist. "I remember every word," Catherine said softly. "You said you knew the truth and you chose me." "I would choose you 1,000 times over," he said. "Every day for the rest of my life I will keep choosing you." He turned her to face him. "I have something to tell you, and I need you to know it comes with no expectations or pressure. Bill Hendricks came to see me today. He is selling the silver spur, and he wanted to know if we would be interested in buying it." Catherine's eyebrows rose. "The saloon? Why would we want to buy a saloon?" "Not to run it as a saloon," James said. "To turn it into something else. A restaurant, maybe, or a hotel. Or we could tear it down and build your dress shop there, right in the center of town. I know that was your dream once, and I have the money now to make it happen if it is still what you want." Catherine looked at her husband's earnest face and felt a wave of love so strong it almost knocked her over. Here was a man who remembered her dreams, who wanted to help her achieve them even though she had already found happiness beyond anything she had imagined. "You know what?" she said slowly. "I think we should buy it, but not for a dress shop or a restaurant." An idea was forming in her mind, something that felt right and true. "I think we should turn it into a boarding house for women who need a fresh start. Women like I was, trying to make their way in the world without family or support. We could offer them safe, affordable housing and help them find respectable work. We could give them what someone gave me, a second chance." James's smile spread across his face like sunrise. "That is perfect. That is absolutely perfect." He kissed her long and deep, and when they broke apart, he was laughing. "How did I get so lucky? How did I find the best woman in Kansas?" "You chose me," Catherine said simply. "Even when it would have been easier not to. Even when everyone else turned away, you stood beside me." They bought the silver spur the following month and spent the summer renovating it. They knocked down walls and built new rooms, installed proper beds and wardrobes, created a kitchen where the women could learn to cook, if they did not already know how. Catherine interviewed every potential resident herself, looking for women who reminded her of her younger self, women with determination and dignity who just needed a chance. The boarding house opened in September with 8 residents. Within a year, it had housed over 30 women, all of whom found work and stability thanks to the safe haven Catherine and James had created. Some of the women became seamstresses in Catherine's growing business. Others found work as teachers or shopkeepers or ranch hands. One became a nurse, another a bookkeeper. They all stayed in touch with Catherine, writing letters to tell her about their lives and thanking her for the opportunity she had given them. Catherine's reputation in Dodge City was fully restored, but more than that, she had become a respected figure in the community. The women of the town asked for her advice on charitable matters. The Reverend invited her to speak at church about the importance of giving second chances. Even Mr. Hartwell stopped her on the street one day to thank her for not holding his daughter's actions against him. The years passed in a happy blur. James expanded the ranch, breeding horses that were known throughout Kansas for their strength and temperament. Catherine's sewing business flourished, and the boarding house never had an empty room. They worked hard, they laughed often, and they loved each other more with each passing season. In the spring of 1882, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She told James one morning as they were watching the sunrise from their porch, the same porch where he had proposed years before. "I am going to have a baby," she said quietly, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. James froze for a moment, then turned to her with an expression of such pure joy that it brought tears to her eyes. "Truly, truly." He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like a boy, then set her down gently as if she were made of glass. "Are you well? Do you need to sit down?" "Should we send for the doctor?" Catherine laughed. "I am fine, James. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am strong and healthy and everything will be all right." And it was. Their son was born in December, a strong, healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after James's father, and he brought a new kind of joy into their lives. James was a devoted father, rocking Thomas to sleep at night and carrying him around the ranch during the day, pointing out horses and cattle and telling him stories, even though the baby was too young to understand. Catherine watched her husband with their son and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. This was her family, this man who had chosen her when everyone else turned away, and this beautiful baby who represented their future. When Thomas was 2 years old, Catherine became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin girls in the summer of 1885. They named them Sarah and Rose, and they were beautiful and wild and kept their parents constantly on their toes. James built additions onto the house to accommodate their growing family, adding bedrooms and a larger kitchen, and a playroom where the children could spread out their toys. The ranch prospered beyond anything James had dreamed. His horses won prizes at fairs and competitions throughout Kansas and beyond. Buyers came from as far away as Texas and Missouri to purchase his stock. Catherine's sewing business had grown so large that she now employed 15 women, and the boarding house had expanded to 2 buildings that could house 20 women at a time. But through all the success and growth, Catherine never forgot where she had come from. She never forgot the feeling of standing alone in the street with her reputation in ruins and her future uncertain. She made sure that every woman who came through the boarding house knew she was not alone, that there were people who believed in her and would help her succeed. On their 10th wedding anniversary, James took Catherine back to the spot where he had proposed. It was sunset again, and the land was golden in the dying light. The children were home with one of the ranch hands who doted on them, giving their parents a rare evening alone. "Do you remember standing here 10 years ago?" James asked, holding both of her hands in his. "I remember everything about that day," Catherine said. "I remember thinking I could not possibly love you more than I did in that moment. And now I know I was wrong. Every day I love you more than the day before. Every day you show me new reasons why I was the luckiest woman in the world when you chose to believe in me." James pulled her close. "I was the lucky one, Catherine. You made me better. You made me braver. You taught me that real courage is not about facing down outlaws or breaking wild horses. It is about standing up for what is right even when it costs you something. It is about choosing love even when the world tells you to choose something else." They stood there as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and closer to home, their children were laughing. The ranch house glowed with lamplight, warm and welcoming, a beacon of home in the vast prairie darkness. Catherine thought about Victoria Hartwell sometimes, wondering what had become of her. She had heard through mutual acquaintances that Victoria had married a banker in Boston, a cold arrangement based on money and social standing rather than love. Catherine hoped Victoria had found some measure of happiness, though she suspected that someone who had tried to destroy another person's life out of jealousy would always be fighting their own demons. But mostly, Catherine did not think about the past. She was too busy living a present that was fuller and richer than anything she could have imagined during those dark days when her reputation lay in tatters. The children grew. Thomas became a serious boy who loved books and numbers, showing an early aptitude for the business side of ranching. Sarah was bold and fearless, begging to ride horses almost before she could walk. Rose was gentle and artistic, spending hours drawing pictures of flowers and animals. James and Catherine raised them to be kind and fair, to stand up for people who could not stand up for themselves, to understand that a person's worth was not determined by their wealth or social standing, but by the content of their character. In 1890, when Thomas was 8 and the twins were 5, Catherine opened a school on the ranch property. She hired a teacher from back east and invited the children of all the ranch hands to attend free of charge. Many of the ranch hands were Mexican or former slaves who had come west seeking opportunity, and their children had little access to education. Catherine was determined to change that. The school started with 15 students and within 3 years had grown to 40. James supported every venture Catherine undertook, just as she supported his dreams for the ranch. They were true partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together and respecting each other's opinions. When disagreements arose, as they inevitably did in any marriage, they talked through them with patience and honesty, always remembering that they were on the same side. The boarding house continued to thrive, and Catherine took deep satisfaction in watching women transform their lives. She saw frightened girls arrive with nothing but the clothes on their backs and watched them leave months later with jobs and confidence and hope for the future. Some of them stayed in Dodge City, becoming part of the community. Others moved on to other towns and other opportunities, but they all wrote to Catherine, telling her they would never forget what she had done for them. In 1895, on a crisp autumn morning, Catherine was working in her garden when she saw a familiar figure riding up the long drive to the ranch house. It took her a moment to recognize the woman, and when she did, her breath caught in her throat. It was Victoria Hartwell. Or Victoria Blackwood now, Catherine supposed, if she had married. Catherine stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands, her heart pounding. She had not seen or heard from Victoria in 17 years. What could possibly bring her here now? Victoria dismounted awkwardly, and Catherine could see that the years had not been kind to her former rival. She was still beautiful, but there was a hardness around her eyes and mouth, a brittleness that spoke of disappointment and regret. "Catherine," Victoria said, her voice uncertain, "I hope I am not intruding." "You are not intruding," Catherine said carefully. "Though I confess I am surprised to see you." Victoria twisted her hands together. "May we speak? I have come a long way and there are things I need to say to you." Catherine considered for a moment, then nodded. "Come inside, I will make us some tea." They sat in Catherine's parlor, a comfortable room filled with books and children's drawings and photographs of the family. Victoria looked around with something like wonder in her eyes. "You have built a beautiful life," she said softly. "I have been very blessed," Catherine agreed, pouring tea into delicate china cups. Victoria took a deep breath. "I came to apologize. I know it is 17 years too late, and I know there is nothing I can say that will make up for what I did to you. But I need you to know that I have regretted my actions every single day since I left Dodge City." Catherine said nothing, waiting. "I was consumed by jealousy," Victoria continued, her voice trembling. "I saw James looking at you the way I desperately wanted him to look at me, and I could not bear it. I told myself that I deserved him more because of my family and my position, but the truth was I knew even then that you were the better woman. That is why I hated you so much." "Victoria, please let me finish." Victoria set down her teacup with shaking hands. "I married in Boston just as my father wanted. A wealthy man, well-connected, everything that was supposed to make me happy, but he did not love me and I did not love him. We had 2 children together, but he spent most of his time with his mistress. He died 3 years ago and I thought I would finally be free, but all I found was emptiness. My children barely speak to me. I have money and a fine house, but I am utterly alone." Tears were streaming down Victoria's face now. "I destroyed your reputation out of spite, and instead of ruining your life, all I did was ruin my own. You found real love with James. You built something meaningful and lasting. And I have nothing but regrets and the knowledge that I brought all of this on myself." Catherine felt an unexpected surge of compassion for the broken woman sitting across from her. She had spent years being angry at Victoria, but looking at her now, she felt only pity. "I forgive you," Catherine said quietly. Victoria's head snapped up. "What? I forgive you, Victoria. I'm not saying what you did was right, because it was not. You tried to destroy me out of jealousy and selfishness, but I have been happy for 17 years and you have been miserable. I think you have punished yourself far more than I ever could." Catherine leaned forward. "Life is too short to carry hatred. I forgave you years ago, even though you never asked for it. I had to, or the bitterness would have poisoned my happiness." Victoria broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Catherine moved to sit beside her on the settee, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. They sat there for a long time, an unlikely tableau of reconciliation. When Victoria finally composed herself, she looked at Catherine with red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but thank you." "We all deserve forgiveness," Catherine said gently. "We all make mistakes. The question is what we do with our regrets. You can carry them like chains, or you can learn from them and try to do better." Victoria stayed for dinner that evening, meeting James and the children. It was awkward at first, but James followed Catherine's lead and treated Victoria with polite civility. The children, who knew nothing of the history between the adults, chattered away happily, telling Victoria about the ranch and their horses and the school. Before Victoria left, Catherine walked her out to her horse. "Where will you go now?" Catherine asked. "Back to Boston, I suppose." "It is where my children are, even if they do not want much to do with me." Victoria paused. "Catherine, can I ask you something? How did you do it? How did you build such a beautiful life after everything that happened?" Catherine smiled. "I had help. I had a man who believed in me when no one else did. But more than that, I decided that I would not let your lies define me. I chose to keep moving forward, to keep being the person I knew I was, regardless of what anyone said about me. And eventually, the truth came out and justice was served." "I am glad," Victoria said, and she sounded like she meant it. "I am truly glad you found happiness. You deserved it far more than I did." After Victoria rode away, Catherine stood watching until she disappeared down the long drive. James came out and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "That must have been difficult," he said softly. "It was," Catherine admitted, "but it was also necessary. I think we both needed it." "You have the biggest heart of anyone I have ever known," James said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I am in awe of you, Catherine Cooper." She turned in his arms to face him. "I learned from the best. You showed me what it means to see the truth in someone, to choose to believe in them even when the world says otherwise. I am just following your example." They stood there in the gathering dusk, holding each other. Two people who had built something extraordinary out of faith and love and unwavering commitment. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Thomas grew into a fine young man who took over much of the ranch management, allowing James to slow down a bit as he aged. The twins both married local men, good men who treated them with respect and love. Sarah and her husband started a horse breeding operation on a parcel of land James deeded to them. Rose married the teacher at the school Catherine had founded, and they continued the educational work Catherine had started. Catherine and James became grandparents, delighting in the parade of grandchildren who filled their home with noise and laughter. They had 8 grandchildren in total, and James built a larger addition onto the house specifically to accommodate family gatherings. The boarding house and sewing business were eventually taken over by some of the women Catherine had helped over the years, women who understood the mission and carried it forward with the same dedication Catherine had shown. The school grew into a permanent fixture of the community, teaching generations of children. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1908, James and Catherine hosted a celebration at the ranch. It seemed like half of Kansas turned out to honor them. There were speeches about their contributions to the community, about the lives they had touched and the difference they had made. But the most moving moment came when a parade of women stood up, one by one, to talk about how Catherine had given them a second chance at life. There was Maria, who had arrived at the boarding house fleeing an abusive husband and now owned her own restaurant. There was Sarah, who had been widowed at 19 with a baby and no skills, and who now ran the most successful bakery in Dodge City. There was Lily, who had been ostracized for having a child out of wedlock and now taught at the school Catherine had founded. There were dozens of them, each with their own story of redemption and transformation. Catherine cried through most of the speeches, overwhelmed by the realization of how far the ripples of one act of kindness had spread. When it was her turn to speak, she stood before the gathered crowd with James beside her, his hand warm and steady in hers. 30 years ago, she said, her voice carrying across the yard, I thought my life was over. I thought that lies and jealousy had destroyed everything I had worked for. But then a man stood up for me when no one else would. He said he knew the truth and he chose me. She looked at James, her eyes shining with love. That single act of faith changed everything. It gave me hope when I had none. It showed me that one person's belief can be stronger than 1,000 people's doubts. She turned back to the crowd. So if there is one thing I want you all to take away from tonight, it is this. Be that person for someone else. Stand up for the person who has no one. Believe in the person everyone else has written off. Choose truth over gossip, compassion over judgment. You never know how one moment of courage might change a life. The applause was thunderous, but Catherine barely heard it. She was looking at James, remembering the day he had sat beside her on that bench and changed the course of her life forever. That night, after all the guests had gone home and the ranch was quiet, Catherine and James sat on their porch in the rocking chairs they had bought years ago. The stars were brilliant overhead, and somewhere in the darkness, an owl hooted softly. Did you ever imagine we would end up here? Catherine asked, reaching for James's hand. Here specifically? No, but somewhere good, somewhere happy? Yes, always. James squeezed her fingers gently. From the moment I met you, I knew my life would be better with you in it. Even when I was just a saloon girl with a ruined reputation. You were never just anything. You were always extraordinary. Everyone else just needed time to see it. Catherine smiled in the darkness. I love you, James Cooper. After 30 years, I love you more than ever. And I love you, Catherine Cooper, my brave, beautiful, incredible wife. They sat there in comfortable silence. Two people who had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, who had built a life and a legacy based on the simple but profound decision to believe in each other. Years later, when they were both old and gray, their children and grandchildren would ask them about that long-ago summer when lies had threatened to destroy everything. They would tell the story together, finishing each other's sentences the way couples do when they have been together for decades, and always they would end with the same moral. That truth and love, when combined with courage and conviction, are more powerful than any lie. James passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1918 at the age of 66. He died as he had lived, with Catherine beside him, her hand in his. His last words were, I would choose you again. Catherine lived for another 5 years, surrounded by the family they had built together. She saw her grandchildren grow and have children of their own. She continued to run the boarding house and the school, refusing to slow down even as her body aged. She died in 1923 at the age of 67, sitting in her rocking chair on the porch of the ranch house. Looking out over the land she and James had built their dreams on. They buried her beside James, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together 50 years before. The headstone reads simply, Catherine Monroe Cooper. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend, she believed in second chances. At her funeral, more than 200 people came to pay their respects. Women whose lives she had changed, children and grandchildren who adored her, members of the community who had been touched by her kindness and generosity. They told stories about her strength, her compassion, her unwavering faith in the goodness of people. But the most poignant tribute came from Thomas, her oldest son, who stood at the graveside and told the story of how his parents had met, how a jealous rival had tried to destroy his mother's reputation, and how his father had stood up and said, I know the truth and I choose you. That is the legacy they left us, Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. Not just the ranch or the businesses or the wealth. They left us the example of what it means to truly love someone, to see them clearly, flaws and all, and choose them anyway. To stand beside them when the world turns against them, to build something beautiful out of faith and commitment and unwavering devotion. He looked at the two graves, side by side, and smiled through his tears. They taught us that our reputation is not what other people say about us. It is what we do when no one is watching. It is how we treat people who cannot help us in return. It is the choices we make when choosing right is harder than choosing wrong. The sun was setting as the mourners dispersed, painting the Kansas sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. And if you had been there that evening, standing in the cemetery as the last light faded, you might have felt it. The presence of a love so strong it transcended death. A love that had started with a simple choice to believe in someone and had grown into a legacy that would endure for generations. In the end, that was the truth that Victoria's lies could never touch, that Catherine Monroe had been and always would be a woman of honor and integrity. And that James Cooper had been wise enough to see it, brave enough to defend it, and blessed enough to spend his life loving her. Their story became legend in Dodge City, passed down through the decades as an example of true love and moral courage. The boarding house continued operating until 1965, helping thousands of women over its 80-year history. The school they founded grew into the town's primary educational institution. And the ranch remained in the Cooper family for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they chose each other despite the odds. On the gate of the ranch, there was a plaque installed by their great-grandchildren. It read, "In memory of James and Catherine Cooper, who proved that truth, love, and courage will always triumph over lies, jealousy, and fear. May all who pass through these gates remember their example and choose to stand up for those who need someone to believe in them." And so the story ends not with a tragedy but with a triumph, not with bitterness but with love, not with a reputation destroyed but with a legacy built that would outlast them all. Because in the end, the truth did come out. And the cowboy who said, "I know the truth and I choose you," did not just save Catherine's reputation or win her heart. He changed the world one act of faith at a time.